The land opens before you in shades of ochre and dust, where the sun lingers too long and the rain has forgotten its way home. This is a place marked not only by drought, but by the weight of what is never spoken. The fences lean tired against the wind. Corrugated roofs shimmer under an endless heat. And the people who live here move with the kind of caution born of old grief. It is the late years of the 20th century in a corner of rural Australia, though the story feels timeless, as though it could belong to any scarred frontier where silence has taken root, deeper than the crops that will no longer grow. You hear the wind before you hear the people. It winds across brittle grass and abandoned paddocks, carrying with it the faint echo of childhood shouts that once filled the fields, but now have grown quiet. Families pass each other at the shops with the nod of a chin. Never too much talk. Never the kind of laughter that spills without care. The country itself seems to demand restraint. Words are measured like scarce water, rationed against the possibility of breaking something fragile. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Novel Whisper Official, and comment below the title of the novel you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon, and into this silence steps the story you're about to follow. A boy runs across a field, his shadow stretched long in the evening light. His shoes kick up dust, and his breath comes hard, sharp in his chest. From a distance, you might think this is ordinary play, but the stillness of the land tells you otherwise. It is the kind of running that has no joy in it, the kind that leaves a mark. Somewhere behind him, a door slams, a voice rises, and then falls into silence, swallowed by the thick air of the countryside. The boy keeps running until the field bends into trees. And then he's gone. This place is broken in ways that few admit. The cracks run through homes where fathers sit with beer bottles, sweating in their hands, where mothers fold washing under skies that refuse to rain, where children grew up learning what not to ask. The land and its people mirror one another, dry, restrained, full of hidden tension. Every silence is a bruise pressed into the air. Every withheld word is a reminder of something buried, not in the ground, but in memory. At night, the town holds itself still. Dogs bark at the distant creak of gates, and the stars look down without mercy, too brilliant against the black to offer comfort. It is in this darkness that whispers travel faster than truth. A child's laugh cut off too soon, a fight behind closed doors, a cry mistaken for the cry of a bird. These fragments stitch themselves into the town's fabric until no one can tell where rumor ends and reality begins. You feel it in the rhythm of the place. Farmers mend fences that will break again. Teenagers lean against the rusted skeletons of old trucks, speaking in half-sentences. Teachers stand before classrooms of restless children who already know too much about the world, and yet are told nothing. Silence has become the unspoken law here, and breaking it feels more dangerous than any storm, yet something is stirring beneath that silence. The land remembers, and so do the people, even if they pretend otherwise. The drought does not only parch the soil, it gnaws at the edges of patience, at the seams of family life. Under the sun, tempers flare faster, fists clench tighter, and grief waits for the smallest spark to consume the dry air. And then, Almost imperceptibly, the stage is set. The boy who runs across the field will not return. The town, already brittle, will be shaken by his absence. What has been hidden will begin to surface, and what has been endured in silence will no longer stay contained. The story of this broken country begins not with thunder or fire, but with the soft sound of a child's footsteps disappearing into the grass. Dawn arrives, thin and chalky, a pale smear pressed against the horizon, and the town wakes to a feeling that does not belong to morning. Sirens don't sound here very often, so the absence of noise is louder than any alarm. The first thing you notice is how many people stand still. Men on verandas, hands on rails, women at letterboxes, fingers worrying the edges of envelopes they won't post. The wind picks up, not with relief, but with a mutter, lifting ash-colored dust that coats tongues and tempers. Somewhere a screen door snaps, and the day begins to organize itself around a fact that cannot be organized. A child did not come home. They start at the Oval because that's where people know to gather when disaster arrives without a plan. Youths pull up, trays rattling with water drums and borrowed radios, and faces appear that you haven't seen together since the last flood, the last fire, the last funeral. The town has muscle memory for emergencies. Lines form, maps are flattened under thermoses, and somebody writes names on a pad, pairing strangers who yesterday would not have spoken. You stand at the trestle table, the smell of instant coffee and dry grass around you, while the mother clutches a photograph with both hands. The paper is soft at the edges, but she has gripped it too long. She isn't crying. She is not doing anything so manageable. She is watching the air, as if a shape might push through it and hand her back her boy. The father arrives late, walking like he has run out of choices. He speaks to the police officer in a voice you can't hear, eyes fixed on the ground between them. His shirt is buttoned wrong by one notch. His hands look like they've been working all night at something too heavy to lift. People try not to look. When their eyes do stray toward him, they snap back, as if glancing at the sun. The first sweep moves out across the paddocks in a wavering line. Boots sink into powdery soil. Every few steps, someone calls out, "Step by step." And the line tightens, a row of bodies trying to stitch the field closed. The grass here is the color of old rope. It whispers as feet brush through it, a sound that makes you think of secrets being told in the wrong ears. Gum trees raise their pale arms above the searchers, and crows draw rough circles in the sky. The creek bed, once a place of yabby nets and muddy laughter, lies scabbed and hollow, strewn with bottle caps and the memory of water. What you hear, mostly, are names. People call the boy's name not as a question, but as an offering. They say it to the air, to the stands of scrub, to the rusted fence wire that birds have learned to balance on. His name moves over the land like smoke. Dogs are brought in. Farm dogs, not trained for this, but willing. And they cast about with the nosing eagerness of creatures who believe the world can be solved. The sun climbs, hats darken around the rims. Jackets are tied at the waist. Somewhere a radio crackles and then mutes, as if embarrassed by its own optimism. By mid-morning, the town has started its other search, the one carried out with eyes instead of boots. In the shop, where the coolers hum and the fly screen door sighs in and out, the owner lines up milk crates and retells what he thinks he saw yesterday. A ute leaving too fast. A man at the pump who paid with cash and didn't look anyone in the eye. A woman with a bruise like a thumbprint on her forearm buying bread and not enough fruit. None of it fits. All of it fits. On the pub veranda, the talk tightens, voices low, words careful and mean. Outsiders are mentioned. Then insiders. Then the family. Everyone knows how this game is played. You suggest motives because you fear there might be none. At school, the children sit 2 inches higher in their chairs, trying to prove they are not the kind of children who disappear. The teacher pins a note to the notice board about counseling, though there is no counselor to come. She counts the seats and miscounts, her throat going dry for a second before she corrects herself. When asked, the students say what children always say. He was fine, he was normal, he was fast at running. He had a scab on his knee, he laughed like a hiccup. He was here. And then he wasn't. The teacher thinks of other years, other terms, other mornings, when a child came late or not at all, and the day carried on unbroken. She thinks of how often she has accepted silence as good behavior. By noon, they've found something the size of a lie. A sneaker tangled in fence wire, blue canvas scuffed white, where toes have dragged through gravel. It means nothing, someone says quickly. Kids lose shoes all the time. The officer lifts it with gloved care, and the mother makes a sound that seems to come from a place where sounds are not meant to live. The father steps back as if he has been hit, as if keeping upright is a task his body may not complete. The wind plucks at the laces and then tires of the game, dropping them limp. The surge shifts to the windmill ridge, where the metal blades tick in a rhythm like an old clock, remembering how to count. The ground is stitched with root tracks and the heel marks of children who have come here to dare each other to climb. A backpack appears, half hidden under taraweed, its zip half open like a mouth, forming a word it can't decide to say. Inside are 2 things that do not help. A marble that catches the light, and a sandwich corner, hard as a stone. The mother presses her fingers to her lips. The officer writes in a book. The town takes a breath that will not come back out. Afternoon rousts more witnesses who are not quite witnesses. A neighbor recalls a ute door slamming late, though it might have been the shed in the wind. A teenager remembers an argument by the Oval, though it might have been 2 boys pretending to fight. An old man at the caravan park swears he saw the boy running at dusk, chased by shadows that could have been kids or crows. Memory performs its old tricks, stitching certainty out of loose thread, brightening some colors, bleaching others. People bring forward what they have and lay it on the table like coins. And still the price is not met. The police house becomes a mouth that swallows statements. The rooms thicken with the smell of paper and tired bodies. Questions are asked and asked again, not because the answers will change, but because repetition might wear a groove deep enough to catch truth. Where were you? What did you hear? Who was with you? Why didn't you say? Silence is the most common reply, but not the most honest. Silence here is a language. It means I don't know. It means I know too well. It means if I say it out loud, it becomes real. It means if I say it out loud, it becomes mine. The mother goes door to door with the officer, and then without him. She steps onto porches that have always been hers by right of being local, and finds they are foreign now. People stand in their doorways and hold their elbows and talk about the weather, about the price of diesel, about the dense sky that refuses to break. They promise to call if they think of anything else. They will not. The mother's voice grows hoarse, and still she knocks, because to stop is to agree that the day has ended, and that night, with all its cruel inventiveness, has won. By late light, the line of searchers is thinner. Bodies tire in a way that hope cannot correct. The land does its usual trick of appearing endless and intimate at once, a map that never lets you see more than a paddock ahead. People return to the oval, carrying what they found: odd socks, a stick that looked like a knife, a sense of having failed at something impossible. The dogs lie down with sighs that are almost human. The sky makes a show of color it does not mean, staining everything gold before surrendering to bruise purple. A generator coughs and then mutters alive, and the oval lights up in patches, a poor imitation of day. Evening brings another kind of search, the one done indoors. The pub fills, the kitchen tables too, in lounges where the television news speaks in a voice that seems disrespectfully calm. Families rehearse alibis without using the word. Who was with whom? Who left when? Who saw what? And why they didn't think it mattered. There is a hardness in the way people hold their forks and glasses. The drought has starved more than the earth. It has starved patience and mercy. Accusations have a way of leaping the gap between thought and mouth, when thirst has been the constant condition. At the community hall, a meeting convenes, as if order can be called to a room like a child to dinner. The officer speaks about procedure and perimeter. Volunteers take fresh rosters. The mother sits 3 chairs back from the front, the father 5 chairs to the right, as if proximity to each other might break something beyond repair. A man in a flannel shirt rises and asks what everyone wants to ask. Are we looking in the right place? A woman answers too fast. Of course, another whispers. Not just outside, inside. The word hovers above them, hot and unwelcome. Inside houses, inside families, inside history. On the way out, near the notice board where lost dogs and lawn mowing services are advertised in curling paper, 2 old friends stop being friends. One says, if you know something, say it. The other says, be careful. The first replies, careful is how we got here. The sentence feels like a match struck in a dry shed, small and bright and hungry. It lights a memory in someone across the room, but they put a boot on it before it catches. Not tonight, they think. Not yet. When the lights go off and the hall door thuds shut, the town stands under a sky that has learned how to be beautiful without being kind. The oval is empty, but for the impression of feet in dust, a map of trying. Somewhere in the darkness, a windmill ticks. Somewhere, a tap drips into a metal sink with the stubbornness of a pulse. And somewhere, in a house where the curtains were drawn too early, an old story shifts on its bunk and sits up, listening, deciding that it is time to be told again. The search drags into its second day, and the land offers little but silence. The police trucks rumble down the main road, raising plumes of ochre dust that hang in the air like smoke, while volunteers push deeper into the brittle fields. Each hour without news feels like another stone added to the backs of the families who walk in the line. Their boots crunch through dry weeds, their eyes flicking toward every hollow tree, every rusted drum, every shadow, where a child could hide or be hidden. You hear the names again, louder now, desperate. The boy's name shouted toward the ridge. The boy's name whispered into the cracks of abandoned sheds. The boy's name spoken in the uncertain voices of children who had once laughed with him at recess. But no answer comes, only the empty rush of wind that scours the paddocks clean of hope. Then the rumors start to grow teeth. In the cramped kitchen of the general store, a pair of women bend close over mugs of tea, voices sharp as cicadas. One insists she saw the boy's uncle driving too fast on the back road. Another swears she overheard shouting at the family's house long after dark. In the bar, men fold their arms across their chests and ask questions that aren't questions at all. Why was the boy out so late? Why didn't anyone notice sooner? Each word lands like a pebble dropped into still water, ripples spreading across the town, touching everyone. Old memories begin to stir with the rumors. You hear the older generation talk about the last time a child went missing, decades ago, when the paddocks were greener and tempers ran just as hot. A name is spoken. The name of a girl who never came home, whose absence was folded into silence until even her story seemed to vanish. The parallels sting. The elders fall quiet, but their silence says more than their words ever did. The young ones, overhearing, carry the fragments into the schoolyard, where stories twist into new shapes. Half true, half imagined. The boy's mother cannot stop herself from replaying every detail of the last evening. She remembers the scrape of the screen door, the flash of bare feet across the yard, the muttered words of her husband carried on the wind. Her mind chews on them again and again, breaking them down into smaller and sharper pieces until they cut at her from the inside. She sits at the kitchen table with her hands pressed flat against the wood, as if she could press herself into stillness. The father spends hours in the shed, the air inside hot and chemical, with the smell of petrol and grease. He works the same bolts over and over, tightening what was already tight, his knuckles scraped raw. When neighbors come by, he says little, only nods. But his silence is heavy, with something that makes them uneasy. A cousin remembers the time he came home drunk and slammed the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. A friend remembers bruises on the mother's arm that she had explained away as a fall. In this place, memory doesn't fade. It calcifies, waiting for an excuse to be pried loose. On the third night, the searchers light a fire at the edge of the oval, not for warmth, but to keep themselves awake. Around it, the town gathers in clusters, each group orbiting its own fears. A guitar appears, strings brittle, but still able to carry a tune. Someone begins to sing, voice cracking, words trembling in the dry air. The song is about rain, about waiting for clouds that never come. The mother listens, but does not join. Her eyes are fixed on the flames, as though the fire might burn away the fog of silence and reveal the truth. As the song drifts into the night, you notice the children sitting apart from their parents. They whisper to one another, sharing memories like contraband. One says he saw the boy running toward the ridge. Another says she heard him call out, but maybe it was the wind. A third insists there was someone else there, a taller figure, a shadow that followed. Their voices quaver with the thrill of telling secrets adults won't say. They know something, or they think they do, and their small truths clash against the heavy silence of their parents. The next morning, a group of searchers find a makeshift shelter in the trees. Branches leaned against one another, a hollow space lined with old blankets and tin cans. Inside lies nothing but the smell of smoke and the faint imprint of a body on the dirt floor. It is not proof, not yet, but it is enough to stir fear into certainty. The boy had been here. He had built this place. He had hidden, or been hidden. The discovery spreads through the town, faster than any official report. In the post office line, people murmur that he must have been running from someone. At the pub, men say the boy's father has always been too quick with his fists. At the petrol station, a rumor blooms that the boy's mother has secrets of her own, a past she never wanted uncovered. Every whispered word is another crack in the already fragile walls of this community. As night falls again, you walk back toward the ridge. The windmill ticks against the stars, and the silence grows deeper, thicker, almost physical. It feels as if the land itself has drawn a breath and is waiting, listening, holding something in. The boy is still gone, but the ground is beginning to speak. And what it whispers is not just about him, it is about all of them, all of you. The past and the present entwined like roots beneath the soil, waiting for the moment when someone dares to dig. The mother's house is a hollow shell now, filled with the echo of a child's laughter that no longer answers when she calls. She sits at the kitchen table, the photograph of her son balanced against a chipped mug, staring into the boy's wide grin, as if the paper smile could guide her back to him. The hands that once kneaded bread, that once tied shoelaces with patient precision, now tremble around a cigarette she doesn't light. Smoke from someone else's chimney drifts across the yard, and she breathes it in like a bitter prayer. Every knock on the door makes her heart leap. Every creak in the floorboards convinces her for a breathless second that her boy has come home. But when the door opens, it is always someone else. A neighbor bringing a casserole she cannot eat. An officer with a clipboard and a rehearsed expression of sympathy. Or a friend who sits in silence, filling the room with words she cannot hear. She thanks them, nods, places untouched plates in the fridge until it is crowded with food that tastes like dust. At night, when the house is stripped of visitors, memory presses hardest. She recalls the evening he disappeared, his quick feet pattering across the yard, the way he looked over his shoulder, the shadow that might have been his father in the doorway, or might have been nothing at all. She replays the moment endlessly, as if running the reel back could reverse time, could snatch him back from wherever he has gone. But the images only blur until she cannot tell if she is remembering or inventing. Her own childhood rises up unbidden, dragged from the dark by grief. She remembers her father's silence at the table, the way her mother moved carefully around him, like a bird avoiding a hawk's shadow. She remembers nights when the house vibrated with slammed doors, when she pressed her face into her pillow to muffle the sound. She remembers the day she decided she would never raise her own child in such a place. Never let silence become the only language spoken. And now here she is, in a house where silence roars like a storm behind the walls. She moves through the rooms at night, touching objects as if they might answer her. His jumper draped over the back of a chair, the crumpled homework still on the counter, the toy truck he left half buried in the garden, wheels jammed with dirt. Every item feels alive with absence, carrying more weight than she can hold. She wants to scream, but the walls seem to lean closer, wanting her back into quiet. In the evenings, she joins the searchers. They walk in rows, sweeping torches across the land, calling his name. Each time her voice cracks, she feels her body fold inward, but she does not stop. Others watch her with wary eyes, as if grief itself might accuse them. When the dogs bark at a fallen log, she runs ahead, her breath tearing, her heart a drumbeat in her chest. There is nothing there but dust and bones of an animal long dead. She wants to collapse, to surrender to the dry soil, but she forces herself upright because she knows if she falls, she might never rise again. Back home, the distance between her and her husband has grown into something impossible to cross. He sits in the living room, eyes fixed on the muted television, the flicker of images painting him in colors that change too quickly to read. She watches from the doorway, waiting for him to look at her, to say anything that might bridge the silence. But he does not turn. His jaw works, as if chewing words he refuses to release. She retreats to the bedroom, closes the door, and presses her ear to the pillow again. The silence hums like an old machine that cannot be turned off. The town begins to whisper her name, along with her son's. At the shop, behind the counter, someone says she was always too quiet, too distant, not the kind of mother who knew what her boy was doing at dusk. At the hall, a neighbor asks why she didn't come sooner, why she let him run, why she trusted him to return. Every question feels like a verdict, every sideways glance like a sentence. She folds her arms across her chest, but the weight inside her only grows heavier. And yet, beneath the grief, a hard resolve begins to take shape. She will not let silence smother him as it smothered her. She will knock on every door, search every field, listen to every rumor until it gives up its seed of truth. She will not let her boy become another ghost in the town's history, another name spoken only in whispers. Her heart may be fractured, but within the cracks, a fierce flame burns, brighter than the sun that scorches the land. One night, she walks out to the ridge alone. The windmill turns in slow, metallic groans above her, and the stars hang low, sharp as nails. She kneels in the dust, presses her hands into the earth, and whispers his name. For a moment, the land seems to answer. The grass shivers, though there is no wind, and the silence breaks, not with words, but with the sound of memory rushing back, with the weight of all that has been unsaid. She knows then that this search is no longer just for her son. It is for every voice the country has tried to bury. The men of the town gather in the mornings, as if by instinct, boots scraping the gravel, shoulders squared against the sun and against each other. They come with dogs, with torches, with rifles slung across their backs, though no one has said out loud what they expect to find. Their faces are leathered, browned by years of drought and work, and their voices are clipped, blunt, stripped of softness. When they speak, it is in commands, not conversation. You go left. Check the creek. Don't waste time. Each word lands like the crack of a stock whip. You stand among them and feel the weight they carry. It is not just the burden of a missing child, not only the dread of what may be found in the next gully or shed. It is something older, heavier. A history of tempers that broke bones, of boys taught to clench fists before they learned to unclench their jaws. It is the language of men who never learned how to speak, except by silence or by strike. The country has been dry for years, but these men have been dry longer, their emotions packed hard like clay, unyielding until they fracture. The father is there too, standing at the edge of the group, his hat pulled low. Some of the men nod to him, but their eyes slide away quickly, as if contact might burn. You see how he holds himself apart, as though even here, among men who share his history, he's not safe. A cousin steps near, touches his shoulder, and mutters something about keeping strong. The father nods, but his jaw tightens and his hand curls into a fist that he buries deep in his pocket. They move out together into the fields. The line is straighter today, the commands sharper, the pace quicker. Dust rises in pale curtains behind them, settling on their clothes, their skin, their tongues. They scan the ground for signs, bent grass, a scrap of fabric, a print in the dirt that might belong to a boy's shoe. Every shadow is suspect, every shape a possible clue. When someone stumbles over a rabbit hole, the others stiffen, half expecting the earth to open and give up its secret. But the ground remains silent. In the silence, the men begin to speak, not to one another, but to themselves. A man mutters about how he once lost his temper at his own son, how the boy had looked at him with wide, wet eyes that he has never forgotten. Another thinks of the fights in the shearing shed, fists and boots and blood on the floor, laughter covering shame. These memories hang in the air like smoke, invisible but choking. They say nothing of them aloud. Instead, they spit into the dust and shout the boy's name, as if volume might drown out what they cannot face. Back in town, the pub becomes the crucible of suspicion. Men lean on the bar, pints sweating in their hands, voices low but sharp. They ask questions no one wants to answer. Where was he last night? Who saw him? What about his father, eh? The questions hang in the air, heavier than the flies that circle the rims of their glasses. A fight almost starts when one man mutters that boys don't just vanish without help. Another says, "Careful what you're implying." Silence falls, then the scrape of stools, the shuffle of boots on wood. The air is thick enough to choke on. The father does not come to the pub. He stays in the shed, sleeves rolled, oil staining his hands black. He tightens bolts that need no tightening. hammers nails into wood already split, as if the noise can drown out his own thoughts. But the noise stops, and the silence returns, and in that silence, he remembers every harsh word he ever spoke to his boy. Every time he turned away instead of listening. Every time his temper snapped like a whip. He remembers the bruise on his wife's arm, the way she pulled her sleeve down and smiled too quickly. And he feels the weight of eyes that might never stop watching him now. The boy's absence has become more than a search. It is a mirror held up to the men of the town. They see their own shadows in the hollow where he should be. They feel the questions pressing against their ribs. They wonder if the land is punishing them, if the drought and the silence and the vanishing are all pieces of the same judgment. They do not say this out loud. They do not know how. Night falls and the men stand again at the oval, faces lit by the wavering glow of the fire. Their shoulders slump now, heavy with fatigue, heavy with history. They drink from dented flasks, and for a moment, the silence breaks into a rough song. Voices low and uncertain, but bound together. The words are of battles fought long ago, of men who stood shoulder to shoulder until the end. But beneath the song is the same hollow note, the same absence, the same missing boy whose name hovers unsaid. And still, in the heart of one woman, a decision hardens. If the men will not speak, then she must. If the country is broken by silence, she will be the one to break it. Even if her own voice shakes. Even if the cost is more than she can bear. The search is no longer only for her son. It is for the truth the men have carried like a secret weapon, hidden but always ready to wound. The fields stretch out like an endless sheet of parchment, pale and brittle, every blade of grass curled inward from thirst. The searchers move slowly, shoulder to shoulder, their boots pressing the earth in a steady rhythm, each step a drumbeat in the silence. From afar it looks like a single body, a great human rake combing the land for something small enough to be lost, large enough to tear the town apart. You walk with them, eyes scanning the ground, ears straining for a sound that is not wind or crow. It is out here, in the margins of the town, that the boy's world lingers most vividly. You can almost see him darting between the saltbush and mallee scrub, his thin arms outstretched, as though chasing some dream only he could see. Children had always made this field their playground, turning rusted car shells into fortresses, dead branches into rifles, and the dry creek into a battlefield. Now the same landscape feels changed. Every hollow in the ground looks like a hiding place. Every pile of rocks looks like it might conceal an answer. The dogs catch something first. Their noses drag across the earth. Then they stiffen, tails twitching. A call runs down the line, and the searchers converge on a patch of scrub. A man kneels, pulls aside the branches, and reveals a small den, hollowed out of dust and grass. Inside, an old blanket, stiff with dirt. A couple of food wrappers, a tin can with its lid curled back like a jagged smile, and in the middle of the floor, a shallow impression, just wide enough for a child to have curled into. The mother stumbles forward, her hand pressed against her mouth. Her eyes rake over the hollow, as if she might conjure him from it, as if the ground might give him back. But the space is empty, and the emptiness feels louder than any scream. She crouches, fingers hovering above the dirt. afraid to disturb the mark that proves he was here. She whispers his name once, softly, as if speaking to the ground itself. The officer writes something in his book, his face unreadable. The townsfolk gather around, the silence splitting into low murmurs. Rumor finds new fuel. If the boy built this place, who showed him how? Who brought the tins, the blanket? Who knew enough to hide him out here? Suspicion leaps from one face to another like sparks across dry grass. An old woman mutters about boys running wild, about fathers with tempers, about how the past never really stays buried. Her words are quiet, but they ripple outward, carried by the wind. The ridge where the den lies is a place of memory. Long before fences and paddocks, before sheds and utes, it was a gathering place for stories, for firelight and song. Now it stands scarred, its soil stripped, its windmill clanking like a broken bell. The men push deeper into the scrub, torches sweeping across tree trunks, etched with knife marks, initials carved into bark. Evidence of boys daring each other to climb higher, jump farther. The land has been marked by their games, and now, perhaps, by something darker. As the day drags on, fatigue makes every voice husher. The searchers argue about where to look next, about who saw what and when. A father accuses another man of holding back, his voice thick with fury. A fist is half raised, then lowered. The line falters, breaks, reforms. The land watches without pity. In town, the discovery of the den spreads faster than any official notice. At the shop, people whisper that the boy must have been running from someone he feared. At the pub, the conversation turns sharper. Maybe he wasn't lost at all. Maybe someone wanted him gone. The men drink faster, and their words grow darker. They talk of discipline, of boys needing firm hands, of the way things used to be. Yet even as they speak, you can hear the hesitation in their voices, the edge of guilt that makes them lower their eyes to their glasses. The children are quieter now, their whispers turning into watchfulness. They avoid the ridge where the den was found, as though the place itself has become infected. One girl sits apart from the others, clutching a marble that glitters green in the dust. She says nothing, but her silence feels different, sharp, deliberate, heavy with knowledge. That night, the mother returns to the ridge. Alone, she kneels by the hollow where her son once lay. The wind pulls at her hair, and the stars burn above her, merciless and bright. She runs her fingers across the indentation in the soil, as if it might still be warm. Her breath comes shallow, and her chest aches with a truth she does not want to name. She remembers her own childhood once more, the nights when she wished to run and never return, the nights when silence was safer than speaking, and she feels the country pressing its silence upon her, urging her to keep its secrets. But she will not this time. The land may be broken, the men may be bound by pride and silence, but she will not let her boy disappear into that same silence. Her voice rises into the night, raw, cracking, carrying his name out across the ridge. The wind takes it, pulls it apart, scatters it into the distance. Somewhere in the dark, a crow answers with a cry that sounds like laughter, or grief, or both. The search continues. The town begins to fracture, and beneath the soil, the old secrets stir again, restless, unwilling to remain buried, to remain buried, to remain buried. to remain buried, to remain buried, to remain buried. By the fifth morning, the town has split like timber under a dry wedge. You can see the fault lines from the bakery window. People who used to stand shoulder to shoulder now stand with a chair between them, a shopping basket, a silence. On the footpath, two men who learn to ride motorbikes together in a summer that smells like petrol and rain face each other without meeting eyes. One says, "You were near the ridge." The other answers, "So were you." Their voices are flat, but their hands give them away, opening and closing as if testing invisible weights. At the notice board outside the hall, the torn edge where a flyer was ripped off becomes a metaphor everyone pretends not to notice. The woman who used to run the kinder roster pins up a meal train list for the mother. Another woman unpins it. "She has a freezer full already," she says. But what she means is different. Generosity feels like taking sides. The men who run the footy club stand with their thumbs hooked into their belts, and someone mutters that the father hasn't shown his face. Someone else replies that if he had, that would be suspicious too. The logic loops until it bites its own tail. In the schoolyard, children learn adult choreography. Groups form and avoid one another like magnets flip to the wrong pole. A boy who used to trade marbles refuses to look at the teacher. Another boy says the missing one cheated at tips, and a scuffle starts that is broken up quickly and painfully. Both boys crying from shame more than hurt. The girl with the green marble sits on the lowest step, thumb pressed to the glass as if it might warm. She knows something, the way children know, instinctively, by the hinge of a door at a wrong hour, by a voice 2 rooms away, gone tight and mean. Her mother has told her not to talk. The instruction sits inside her like a stone. When the bell rings, the marble slips from her hand and skitters across the concrete, coming to rest at the foot of a boy who whispers the missing child's name like a challenge. He doesn't pick it up. The search line fractures along the same seams. Pairs who used to work well together now refuse to be paired at all. "I'll go with him," someone says, meaning, "I won't go with you." Maps on the trestle table become battlegrounds where fingers jab at contour lines. The officer tries to keep his voice measured, but even he can feel the tone shift. The willingness thinning like water poured too far. A volunteer, red-faced, shouts that the den proves the boy was hiding from someone. Another shouts back that boys build dens for fun. The wind carries both statements away, leaving behind the grit on teeth and the aftertaste of accusation. The father is seen and not seen. He walks the fence line with a coil of wire in one hand, as if mending something that still exists. When a youth slows beside him, he keeps his gaze on the posts. The driver leans out and asks, too casually, how his night was. The father nods once, twice, and lifts the wire with both hands, as if it weighs as much as a steel beam. The ute idles longer than it needs to, then pulls away. Behind the father, the fence runs true for 20 meters, and then stops at a gate that has been padlocked from the other side. The neighbor put the lock on yesterday, after 20 years of a gate that swung easy. "Stock," he said when asked. "Can't risk it." What he meant was, "I don't want you walking through my paddock anymore." Friendships fail loudly and softly. Loudly, on the pub veranda, where a man slams his glass down so hard the foam leaps and says that anyone who hits a dog will hit a child. A man across from him stands up, because everyone knows who once kicked a dog in front of the servo. The barman says both names with the same tired warning. Stools scrape, shadows lengthen. The jukebox fails to swallow enough of the tension. Softly, on a back porch, where two women exchange Tupperware, and not a single word. The plastic lids clicking like teeth. One of them will not step inside the other's house anymore. She's afraid of what her daughter might ask if she sees the family photos on the wall. On Sunday, the church fills, not out of piety, but out of habit, out of the old belief that proximity to ritual makes people kinder. The pastor's prayer is water poured on hot tin. It hisses and vanishes. When he speaks of community, a murmur moves through the pews that could be agreement or could be dissent. A woman stands, sheets of paper trembling in her hand. She wants to organize a door knock for any new leads. A man in the last row says, "This is not a witch hunt." Everyone hears which word he emphasized. The mother sits near the front, with her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles shine. The father stands at the back, near the door, where escape is easiest. When the final hymn begins, the congregation sings in the unsure key of people who have forgotten how to harmonize. The police house becomes a revolving door for relationships ending. A friend of the family arrives and asks to change a statement. "I remembered something," she says. But the way she shifts on the plastic chair says she remembered courage and then lost it again. A man withdraws the offer of his paddock for a search base, citing insurance. A teenager who had been in the boys' class the year before refuses to hand over his phone, then hands it over, then asks for it back, his face a clock ticking between defiance and panic. The visiting detective from the city uses the phrase "persons of interest," and the room inhales as one. The local constable winces, like someone seeing a fence cut with a bolt cutter. Necessary, perhaps, but rough on the eyes. At the Oval, rosters are reprinted with names crossed out. People are busy, suddenly. They have water to cart, fences to check, elderly relatives to visit 2 towns over. The few who stay longer wear their loyalty like high-vis vests, glaringly visible. A man brings his son to the search and keeps a hand on the boy's shoulder the whole time, as if proximity is a charm against vanishing. The boy's eyes track the ground, and the father's hand in alternating glances, learning 2 lessons at once. Stay close, and do not trust the ground. The mother spends a morning going door to door with flyers that have started to curl at the corners. She holds one against each screen, describing the boy's laugh, the freckle near his ear, the new scab on his knee that looks like Australia tipped on its side. People take the flyer and say, "We're thinking of you." Words that feel like coins dropped into an empty jar. At one house, a woman she has known since school says, "I can't have you in. Sorry, the baby is sleeping." Neither of them looks at the lounge room window where blue light flashes. The mother says she understands. She understands too well. On the next veranda, she pauses, head lowered, until the throat burn recedes. Then she knocks again. Meanwhile, the girl with the green marble stops bringing it to school. Her mother has taken it, saying marbles are choking hazards for her little brother. The girl knows that is both true and false. She lies awake and watches light slant across the ceiling, remembering the night the kitchen door opened and a shadow stretched long and strange across the lino. She remembers a voice that spoke too softly to be safe. She counts the ticks between the fridge's clicks, like she's counting to a truth. Toward evening, a storm pretends to form, the sky bruising at the edges, then thinks better of it and clears. A man arrives at his friend's shed with a carton of beer, as he has done every Friday for years, and finds the door bolted. He stands with the carton balanced on his hip, looking at the bolt, then at his own boots, then at the quiet house. He puts the carton down on the step and leaves. Inside, his friend hears the ute start, watches the tail lights from the kitchen, and does not move until the red has faded from the leaves. Even the land participates in the breakages. A section of shared fence is replaced overnight with new wire that catches the sun like a blade. The path between two backyards, worn by decades of children cutting through, is blocked by a stack of firewood. The windmill that used to be everyone's landmark now marks territory. One family insists it sits on their side. The other produces a yellowing map that says otherwise. People look at ground as if it can lie. By night, the oval fire looks smaller, maybe because fewer stand around it. The sing-alongs have stopped. In their place is the sound of someone sharpening a mower blade. Long, dragging strokes that turn nerves into harp strings. You stand near the dark and watch two men speak with their mouths close to their sleeves, the way men talk when they are deciding whether to say something old and dangerous aloud. One lifts his chin toward the father's house. The other shakes his head once, hard. The first says a name, the second says a different name. The air between them goes brittle. Underneath all this brittle, there is a groan, the sound of weight settling on rotten joists. It is not yet collapse. It is that long second before. The town holds its breath, not in solidarity, but in dread. Somewhere, in a room grown airless with curtains drawn at noon, a drawer opens and a photograph is taken out, held and not put back. Somewhere, a story that has slept for 20 years rolls over and blinks at the ceiling. Somewhere, a child in a narrow bed turns her face to the wall and decides who she will dare to tell. The nights stretch longer now, or maybe it only feels that way because sleep refuses to come. You lie awake with the town, listening to the silence pressing down, heavier than the heat. The missing boy is not just one absence anymore. He has become a doorway through which all the old ghosts slip back in. They arrive uninvited, carrying the weight of memories no one wanted to touch. The air grows crowded with them, though no one names what they are. In the mother's house, the ghosts sit at the kitchen table with her. They wear her father's voice, the voice that once cracked across the yard like a whip, a voice that told her to hush, to keep secrets, to endure. They wear her mother's silence, the way she folded into herself, the way she never contradicted, never raised her head. The mother presses her palms to her temples, trying to push them out, but the ghosts are patient. They have been waiting for years in the cracks of this place. And now the boy's vanishing has set them free. The father meets his ghosts in the shed. They wait between the tools, crouched behind rusted fuel drums, rising with the smell of petrol. They remind him of every night his temper boiled over, of every slammed door, every bruise he tried to forget. They speak in his own voice, mocking him, telling him that silence was never enough to keep the truth buried. He lifts the hammer and brings it down hard on the same nail again and again, as if driving steel into wood could silence them. The noise echoes, but when it stops, the ghosts remain. Even the children are not spared. In the schoolyard, their play has shifted. No more games of chase, no more laughter ringing across the gravel. Instead, they reenact the search, moving in stiff lines, calling the boy's name as if it were a spell. Some pretend to be police, others dogs, others the missing boy himself, darting between the gum trees until someone catches him and drags him back. The girl with the green marble refuses to play. She watches with wide eyes, fingers curled tight around the memory she carries, but cannot speak. At the pub, the ghosts gather too, invisible but undeniable. They press against the men's backs as they lean on the bar, whispering old stories into their ears. A fight from years ago resurfaces, a punch thrown behind the shearing shed. A boy once sent away and never spoken of again. A woman's scream that no one went to answer. The men drink deeper, their laughter louder, too sharp, meant to drown out the echoes. But the ghosts do not tire. They wait in the pauses, in the silence between songs on the jukebox, in the moment when a man lifts his glass and cannot quite meet his mate's eyes. The town itself seems to breathe with these memories. The empty paddocks feel like graves. The windmill's slow rotation moans like a lament. The cracked earth yawns open wider, as if it might swallow more than water. At dusk, when the sky burns with false color before fading into darkness, you can almost see the shadows lengthen into shapes that do not belong to trees. The mother senses it most sharply. She sits in her boy's room, the air stale with the smell of dust and old crayons. She runs her fingers across the drawings taped to the wall. Stick figures, crooked houses, a sun too large for the paper. She whispers to the figures as though they might answer. But what comes back to her is not her son's voice. It is her own younger, crying behind a locked door. She remembers the taste of fear, metallic as rust, and she understands with sudden clarity that silence has always been the enemy. That night, she dreams of the den in the field. She sees a boy curled inside, his small body pressed against the dirt, his eyes wide open in the dark. Behind him loom larger shapes, shadows that take on the outlines of the men she grew up with. Her father, her husband, others whose names rise like stones in her throat. She wakes with a gasp, heart pounding, the room still heavy with the presence of those ghosts. She knows now that the past is not gone. It is alive, crouched in the corners, breathing with the house, waiting for someone to open the door. The next day, she does not wait for the search party. She sets out alone, walking toward the ridge, the flyer still crumpled in her hand. The town watches from verandas, eyes following her, mouths closed. No one calls after her. No one offers to join. Silence again, but this time, she does not turn back. The land stretches out before her, and though the soil is dry and the grass brittle, she feels each step crack through more than earth. She's breaking something older, heavier. She is breaking the silence. And in the distance, the wind carries a sound, faint, almost imagined. Not a crow, not the groan of the windmill, not the rustle of grass. A sound that might be a child's laugh or a child's cry. A sound that might be memory or might be truth finally pushing through the soil. The mother stops, heart hammering, and listens. The country itself seems to lean forward, waiting. The ghosts, restless now, press closer, as if they too need to hear. By the time the 6th day arrives, the town no longer pretends at unity. The cracks that have always run beneath the surface split wider, like dry soil, giving way after too much heat. You can feel the tension before you even hear it, a vibration in the air that makes the gums shiver. Neighbors who once shared tools and water tanks now pass each other in silence, their eyes sharp as barbed wire. On the main street, the shopkeeper lowers his voice when one family enters, then raises it when another arrives. He tells one story at the counter, a different one behind the shelves. The missing boy has become less a child and more a symbol, an excuse to exhume grudges left to rot for decades. One man insists the father's temper is to blame. Another mutters that people should look to the uncle. A third says, maybe the land itself is cursed, that nothing grows here. Not crops, not children, not peace. Each word is a spark dropped on tinder, and the air is already thick with smoke you cannot see, but can taste on the back of your tongue. The mother feels it most acutely. Every knock on her door now carries an accusation hidden inside the gesture of sympathy. We're thinking of you, they say, but their eyes flick past her, measuring the silence of her husband in the next room. When she leaves a casserole untouched, it becomes another story. She's ungrateful. She is hiding something. She knows more than she says. She can feel herself shrinking under their glances, but inside her, something refuses to yield. She has known this kind of watching before, as a child in her father's house, when silence was demanded and suspicion hung over every word. She will not let the town's silence decide her son's fate. At the pub, the break comes. Two men who once played on the same footy team, who once celebrated wins with arms around each other's shoulders, now face off across the scarred bar. One accuses, his voice low but sharp, of seeing something near the ridge. The other denies it, his words tumbling out too fast, too brittle. A stool topples, the barman steps between them, but the damage is done. The fracture is no longer quiet. It has a sound, a rhythm, like the first splintering crack in a collapsing tree. The children notice. At school, they no longer play games of chase. Instead, they mimic the adults, staging mock interrogations in the dusty yard. One child stands with folded arms, demanding answers. Another stares at the ground, silent, guilty by imitation. The girl with the green marble watches, lips pressed shut, her small fists clenched. She remembers the voice she heard that night, low and dangerous, sliding under the door like smoke. She knows what the others only suspect, but the command from her mother still weighs on her tongue. Say nothing. And so she doesn't. Yet silence, she senses, is not safety. It is a cage. The searchers walk again, but the lines are ragged now. Where there was once a single body moving across the fields, there are gaps wide enough for secrets to slip through. Men argue about where to search, about whether to keep looking at all. Some drop out, citing work, fences, sick cattle. Others stay out of pride, determined to be seen trying. Every choice, every absence, becomes another reason for suspicion. The land itself mirrors their divisions. Where the drought has cracked the soil, weeds push through like accusations, stubborn, unwanted, impossible to pull out. The windmill groans in its slow turning, and every squeal of metal sounds like a protest. At sunset, the sky stains red, and someone mutters that it looks like blood. No one laughs. That night, the mother does not go to the hall. She sits by the window instead, watching the town fracture in the spaces between houses. She sees lights on in kitchens where people whisper behind closed doors, shadows passing across curtains like figures in an old play. She knows some of them are speaking her name. She knows some of them are speaking her husband's. She feels the weight of it pressing against the glass, against her chest. She whispers her boy's name again. Not to the neighbors, not even to the night, but to herself. So she does not forget the sound of it. The country, too, seems to whisper. Not in words, but in the restless sigh of wind across the brittle fields, in the groan of trees that have seen more than they can bear. It whispers of the girl who vanished decades ago, whose name was folded away until now. It whispers of fists, of slammed doors, of children hiding in shadows they should never have known. It whispers of the boy who ran into the field and did not return. And as you walk the silent streets, you feel it. The fragile skin of the town is tearing. The silence that once held everything together is failing. What lies beneath is darker, older, and it is beginning to show. Morning arrives with a brittle shine, a light that polishes everything sharp. You feel the town poised on its toes, as if the street itself might spring. The notice board outside the hall blooms with newer rosters laid over old, but hardly anyone signs. In that hesitation, a small figure steps forward. The girl who once clutched a green marble stands in the doorway with both hands jammed into the pockets of a faded hoodie. Her mother's warning clings to her like smoke, but the warning has begun to smell like fear, not care. She looks past the adults to the woman at the trestle table, the mother, and walks straight to her. The girl opens her palm. A green glass eye glints there, tiny, perfect. "This is his," she whispers, not to the room, but to the woman who will understand the shape of truth. The mother's fingers close around the marble as if it might heat in her hand. "Where?" she asks, voice stripped to wire. The girl swallows. "Near the tank," she says. "Behind the padlocked gate. I saw him run there. I heard a voice. I didn't say." Her words arrive in uneven handfuls, but each one lands with the weight of a stone. The room flinches. Someone says the neighbor's name, then says it again, louder, as if volume will produce courage. Faces turn toward the window where, across the oval and beyond a stingy row of gums, the new wire fence shimmers like a fresh scar. The officer nods once. A bolt cutter appears from the back of a ute. No one pretends this is routine anymore. You walk with them, the air bright and hard in your lungs, At the gate, the new lock gleams, too clean, in a place that wears dust like skin. The officer gives the town a look meant to slow hearts, then fits the cutter's jaws. Metal parts with a tired snap. The chain slithers down and the gate swings in, its hinge complaining like an old man standing. The paddock beyond feels different, as if a room has been opened after holding its breath too long. You can smell warm steel, old water, something sweet gone wrong. The tank squats on its stand near the windmill, a corrugated cylinder with a seam like a healed wound. A ladder clings to it, rungs shining where hands have polished them, smooth over years. The windmill ticks and then stills, an eye deciding whether to blink. The officer calls a name. No answer. He calls again, gentler, like a question he already knows the answer to. He mounts the ladder, slow, measured, a man who understands that what is at the top will change the town's shape forever. He looks, and everything below him goes quiet, in a way that has nothing to do with silence. Hats come off without instruction. A woman folds her arms across her stomach and rocks like a boat tied too loosely. The mother stands very straight, the marble a hard planet in her fist. The officer's shoulders lower a fraction, then he speaks into the radio. Syllables that sound like code because ordinary words are too soft for this. Another ladder. Another set of hands. The wind picks up and then thinks better of it. Word moves the way grief moves here. Fast, without the need for a mouth. By the time the second ute shudders to a stop, the neighbor who locked the gate has arrived. He comes downhill in a hurry that looks like retreat. His voice is ready with explanations that aren't questions. Insurance, stock, kids mucking around. "This is my boundary," he says, as if law could unmake what is true. But his eyes snag on the ladder, then on the officer's face, and something inside him loosens into what it always was. The father appears at the fence line, chest heaving, hands empty and dangerous. Men step sideways to be between him and the neighbor, without drawing a line you can see. "What did you do?" the father asks. The neighbor lifts his palms and shows them the stains of a life on a paddock. Oil, rust, sun. "He wasn't meant to be here," he says. "He was spooking the dogs. The sentence arrives at a cliff and looks down. "I told him to go. He climbed. He slipped. It was quick." He looks at the windmill as if it could agree. No one breathes. The officer's voice changes. Not cruel, not kind, but built to carry weight. "You left him," he says. It is not a question. The neighbor's eyes flash with a kind of panic that uses anger as a mask. "I panicked. It was night. I was going to call." His mouth can't decide which lie to choose. He finds another. "I didn't want trouble for the family. For his family. For me." The last word is the truest he has said. A sound rises then, not loud, not sharp, but deep. The town's old timbers giving way. The father lunges and is caught by 3 men, who know the weight of a man who wants to break something enough to end himself in the process. He fights and then sags, gutted. The mother steps away from the people holding their breath on her behalf and walks to the neighbor until she's close enough to see the nick of an old razor scar on his jaw. "You looked and you left," she says. Her voice does not shake. You left him with the water and the dark and your fear. She opens her hand and shows him the marble. He carried light, she says. The neighbor cannot hold her gaze. His shoulders pull in, a man making himself small too late. History insists on its cue. An old woman at the back makes a sound like a hinge and says a name no one has said in years. The missing girl from the old story. Someone else says the name of the man who fenced this property before this neighbor, a man whose temper filled a generation with quiet. A third mentions a ladder, a fall, a story that's scabbed over too quickly. You can feel the timeline braid, then with now, silence with silence. The same shapes repeating like windmill blades. The neighbor shakes his head fast, a dog tormented by flies. That was different, he says, which is another way of saying the same. The officer reads the room like a weather map. He sends one constable for tape and another for blankets. He speaks to the neighbor in a tone that has more iron than volume. The words are technical, but their meaning is old. You will come with us. The neighbor stares at the tank as if it might roll away and take him with it. He nods or he doesn't. Either way, the day has decided. The cuffs appear. Metal meets wrist. A camera hums alive in a detective's hands, clicking the story into a chain of frames. The wind shifts, and the smell thickens. Iron, algae, summer rot. People lift cloth to their faces. The mother does not. She stands and lets the air touch her, refusing the small mercy of less truth. She thinks of her boy building his den, of the shallow print of his body in the dirt. Of the nights she swallowed her own fear whole and called it endurance. She looks at the men gathered here, the ones with fists, the ones with words, the ones with silence, and for a second she sees them as boys, dusty-kneed, running, climbing, being told to be hard and harder still, until the only soft thing left in them was a target. When the small procession starts back toward town, the neighbor in the back of the police truck, the father held on both sides by men who love him enough to keep him from damaging what little is left. The oval waits. People who did not dare to come to the fence wait for the verdict their bodies already know. The detective will say accidental and obstruction and evidence and statements. The words will be correct. They will not be enough. You can feel the gap opening between legality and justice. And in that gap, the town's goes squat with thin smiles. At the hall, statements become the new currency. Some are given clean. More are given like coins pried from a closed fist. A man admits he heard shouting that night and turned the radio up. Another confesses he saw a boy on the ladder and drove on because he was late, and because it was easier to be late than to stop. The girl sits with a blanket around her shoulders, the marble gone from her hand, her eyes fixed on the mother, as if waiting for permission to breathe. The mother crosses the room and kneels, bringing her face level with the child's. You did the brave thing, she says. The girl nods once and crumples against a stranger, who is not strange anymore. The father asks to make a statement, and for the first time since the boy ran, he speaks in full sentences. He lists angers by their proper names. He lists silences by theirs. He does not ask forgiveness, perhaps because he understands Forgiveness is not a thing that can be handed across a table like a document. He signs his name. The letters, trying to look like a steady hand and failing. Outside, the windmill on the neighbor's ridge turns without squealing. A brief kindness of oil on metal no one remembers applying. Evening folds over the town like a coverlet laid on a bed after the doctor has gone. Lights come on in houses that feel altered. Rooms shifted half an inch out of true. The fire at the Oval is not lit. People are tired of warmth that cannot touch what is cold. You listen to the country breathe, a long, uneven inhale that sounds like a body deciding to live despite itself. The reckoning has not fixed anything. It has pulled the roof off and shown the rot. That is not mercy. It is necessary. In the mother's kitchen, the marble sits on the table, under the yellow cone of a lamp. It casts a small green circle on the wood, a world contained, lit from within. The mother touches it, then leaves it where it is. Some light should be allowed to burn through the night. The days that follow feel like the long echo after a gunshot. The silence broken, but still ringing. The boy has been found, though not alive, and the word everyone had avoided sits heavy in the throat of the town. Dead. No one says it loudly. It leaks out in fragments, in half-phrases, whispered at the post office, in mutters over fences. But it does not go away. It hangs above the streets like the dry heat. Inescapable. The mother moves through her house as if the walls have grown taller. The rooms that once echoed with footsteps now hold only the memory of them. She folds her son's shirts, one by one, into boxes. But each shirt feels like skin, soft and warm, and she cannot decide if she is preserving him or burying him again. Her own childhood presses close, reminding her how grief was handled in her mother's house, with silence, with endurance, with the rigid belief that nothing must be said aloud. She looks at her husband across the kitchen, his hands still black with grease, his jaw still clenched, and she knows this is the moment. To stay silent now would be to teach her son, wherever he is, that silence wins. So she speaks, not with accusation, not with rage, but with a voice that refuses to stay buried. She tells the town what she remembers, the nights of shouting, the bruises explained away, the doors slammed so hard they rattled the glass. She tells them of the boy's fear, how he flinched at sudden sounds, how he ran into the fields, not to play, but to escape. Each word is like tearing open her own skin. But she does not stop. She will not let him be remembered, only as the boy who vanished into the dry earth. He must also be remembered as the boy who lived, who laughed like a hiccup, who built a den with his own hands to carve out a place where he could be safe. The hall fills again, but this time the atmosphere is different. The ghosts are here, of course they are, but they no longer whisper from the shadows. They stand in the open, visible in the way people shift uncomfortably, in the way old men cough into their fists, in the way mothers grip their daughters' shoulders too tightly. The old story of the girl who disappeared years ago is told again, not as rumor, but as history. And for the first time, the town admits aloud what it had always known, that she, too, had run, and that silence had buried her as surely as soil. The father listens, his head bowed, as if the words are blows he's long deserved. He does not speak to defend himself. When his name is spoken, he does not flinch. Perhaps he has run out of silence. Perhaps the reckoning has found him at last. The other men shift around him, uneasy, because if one man is guilty, then perhaps they all are. If not by action, then by the long years of looking away. The silence they thought would keep them safe now marks them all. Outside, the land remains unchanged. The windmill turns, the earth stays dry, the grass remains brittle, but the air feels altered. The silence is no longer unbroken. It is jagged, full of words that have finally been spoken aloud. The town is still fractured, its pieces sharp, but they are visible now. The pretending has ended. The truth, once buried, has clawed its way to the surface. In the quiet of her kitchen, the mother lights the cigarette she has held unlit for days. Smoke curls upward, softening the edges of the room. On the table, the marble glows faintly in the lamplight, a green reminder of the boy's laughter, of the den he built, of the light he carried, even into the dark. She touches it, not to keep him here, but to remember. Outside, the night is still, but it no longer feels like silence. It feels like aftermath, raw and unfinished, waiting to be shaped into something else. The country is still broken. It may always be broken. But in the cracks, where silence once ruled, words have begun to take root. Fragile, uncertain, but alive. And in that fragile growth lies the faintest possibility. Not of mending what is gone, because nothing can return the boy, but of refusing to let silence bury the next story, 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 bury the next